After studying this module, you shall be able to know about the ecological approach to community, learn about its application to community-based interventions, identify the principles of ecological model, understand and analyze Bronfenbrenner's theory of ecological systems to community approach. Let's just introduce this module. Community psychologists take what Kelly has called an ecological view of human functioning, meaning that problems are seen as faulty adaptation in the natural environment rather than solely as deficiencies of individuals. The ecological view means that first, community psychologists need to know about the communities in which they are working. A community could be any social environment in which people function: school, neighborhood, hospital, workplace or church. According to Trickett 1996, human activity does not develop in a social vacuum, but rather it is vigorously situated within a socio-historical and cultural context of meanings and relationships. An ecological context is a setting that influences an individual, such as the physical and social, economic and political environment. It means that behavior can be better understood if the context in which it takes place is understood. For example, if you watch a person standing next to the road, talking loudly and making wild gestures, it may not make sense. However, if two cars that had collided and one person accusing the other of reckless driving were to be added to the scenario, the incident would make more sense. It also implies that changes in human behavior may be possible when patterns of social and organizational relationships change or the physical environment changes. For example, if the management style in an organization changes, the stress levels of the workers may also change. This means that psychological interventions should not focus on individual behavior alone, but should also be introduced at broader levels of the social organization. This way of thinking opens new ways of conceptualizing behavior, because problems are not seen simply a result of intra-individual processes, but also as incompatibilities between individuals and their environment, or as dysfunctional adaptations to a particular set of environmental circumstances. For example, child abuse is not only associated with individual characteristics, but can also be related to various other factors such as parental style, lack of support networks, economic factors such as unemployment, and socio-cultural forces such as climate of violence. Moreover, thinking in ecological terms also opens up multiple ways of encouraging individual and community change through changing aspects of the individual social context interface. Now let's talk about the principles of the social ecological model. Kelly suggested using 4 principles from biological ecology to guide community psychologists' assessment of natural social environments. These are the following. The first, principle of interdependence. The social ecological model holds that the multiple components of a social context are interrelated and influence the other parts. Changes in one part may produce change in other parts of the context. For example, changes that make teachers feel more appreciated and more important will affect their behavior toward children in their classes. This in turn will affect how children behave in school, which in turn may further reinforce teachers' positive feelings about their jobs. On the other hand, the interdependence of component of the school may result in negative effects where they are not expected. For example, introducing a new counseling service for aggressive children may lead teachers to believe that these children are the responsibility of that program. Thus, teachers may refer difficult children to the special program and not make a serious effort to handle them in the regular classroom. Children referred to the service may believe they are labeled as bad and increase negative behavior in order to live up to the label. Before planning to institute changes, community psychologists must be aware of the independencies between components. The second is principle of distribution of resources. According to the social ecological model, all communities have different sets of resources. These include money, time, human resources, and political support. One can understand community functioning by analyzing the definition, distribution, utilization, and development of these resources. Interventions can affect the way resources are created and defined, as well as the way they are distributed. How a community spends the funds at its disposal may also indicate which issues are considered important in that community. If a community spends most of its available funds on efforts to combat AIDS, this could be seen as an indication that AIDS is a priority for this community. Prioritizing AIDS in this way will mean that fewer resources may be available for addressing other community needs, such as helping people with disabilities. This is also about cycling of resources. The community has within itself resources that can be used to solve many of its problems. For example, many people in a school may be skilled in helping students who are experiencing personal problems. Teachers, coaches, other students, parents, as well as guidance counselors may have relevant interpersonal skills. Now, the third is the principle of adaptation. Adaptation refers to the process by which people cope with available or changing resources in their environments. Different skills or competencies are necessary to successfully adapt to the demands of each community. Problem behavior is seen as a failure or as mental illness rather than simply as a deficiency of an individual or as mental illness. What appears to be problem behavior may be quite appropriate in a different context. For example, immigrant children may be adept at verbal expression in their native language, but may mistakenly be seen as lacking in intelligence because they cannot handle the new language at the proficiency level demanded by the schools. A community psychologist interested in helping these children meet school demands would want to build on already existing competencies rather than to dismiss them. For example, psychiatric patients who have been hospitalized for many years may not have families, jobs, or friendships to which they can return. Their only role has been of dependent patient with few skills for independent living. In this situation, a community psychologist might try to create a new social environment in which psychiatric patients may use the skills they do have to lead independent and protective lives. The fourth is the principle of succession. Environments are not static but change continuously. Succession refers to the orderly process of community change as a way of adapting to new situations. In the natural course of things, all communities change. They must adapt to change in the external environment. The role of a community psychologist is not simply to help the community mobilize its resources to solve current problems, but to help it prepare for future changes. For example, a school may be affected by changes in the job market and in local economic conditions, technological advances, and the new social pressures. A community psychologist takes a long-term perspective and asks how current work in the community will affect his ability to meet future challenges. Long-term success of community interventions requires planning for succession to leadership. Now we'll talk about Bronfenbrenner's theory of ecological systems. Bronfenbrenner described the environment in which development takes place in terms of a series of nested systems fitting into each other. An individual exists within layers of social relationships. The family, friendship network, which we call as microsystems, organizations, neighborhoods, which we call as the exosystems, and culture and society, which we call as macrosystems. Each layer has an impact on the other layers in an independent way. An individual thus lives in a constantly changing context influenced by the changing relationships between individual level context, macro context within which these micro contexts develop. Bronfenbrenner identified basically 4 environmental systems that are important in understanding individual behavior, namely microsystems, mesosystems, exosystems, and macrosystems. Now we'll talk about these systems one by one. Microsystem is defined as the immediate system of which the individual is a part of. This includes all the people with whom the individual has direct interactions. For a child, this would be, for example, his or her family, classroom, school, friendship network, and sports team. The mesosystem is defined as a set of linkages between the microsystems or settings in which the individual is located. Bronfenbrenner proposed that development during childhood would be enhanced if the different settings in which the child interacts were strongly linked. For example, when the values taught at school and at home correspond, the child will probably adjust well to these values. When the values do not correspond, the child may become confused. The macro systems involve large-scale societal factors that have an impact on people's lives, such as governmental policies and decisions, as well as ideologies and belief systems. It includes the attitudes and values of people in a particular socio-economic position, ethnic group or culture, as well as economic trends and gender roles. Bronfenbrenner therefore recognized the influence of socio-cultural and economic factors such as poverty and oppression, as well as large-scale social change or behavioral patterns. Through defining the various environmental interaction systems, Bronfenbrenner recognized the influence of the wider environment and higher order systems on human behavior. These levels constantly interact with and influence each other. Blosher accordingly describes communities as complex human systems that depend on collective and cooperative efforts to achieve their objectives. They are formal organizations of organizations. The patterns of organization of the communities people form to meet their needs have almost an infinite variety. Using this theory, the interventions to address the underlying causes of psychosocial problems are almost infinite in variety. For example, interventions at the following levels may influence drug-related behavior amongst young people. At the micro level interventions may include education about the dangers of drug use for teenagers, improved family communication, discussion groups consisting of young people, and peer education to change the peer group norms. At the exo level, a school can actively address the problem of drug abuse amongst learners by developing a drug policy, and learners' parents' places of employment could provide medical insurance facilities that will allow parents to access anti-drug counseling programs for their children. At the macro level, legislation to restrict the availability of drugs and media campaigns to change the community's perception of drug use and the culture of taking a pill to feel better, whatever the problem, can also address the problem. The ecological theory therefore highlights the larger complex picture of interaction within a community and does not focus on the individual in isolation. The value of Bronfenbrenner's theory is its definition and understanding of the various levels of interaction that influence each other in a continuous process of change as an attempt to understand the complexity of individual and community functioning. Now we will talk about some of the criticisms of the ecological approach to community psychology. It does not focus on change at the micro level, the meso level, and sometimes the exo level, but is criticized for not being sufficiently transformative at the macro level. It also does not sufficiently consider the complexities of the experiences and shared realities within communities. Applebaum's evaluation of the ecological theory, as quoted by him, wills it is able to lead community psychology along the bridge towards new epistemological territory. It has not provided community psychology with a sufficiently clear map of the new territory to enable it to, at some stage, cross the bridge towards the realization that knowing is indeed being and the territory becomes synonymous with the map. Now let us take a look at the life and contribution of Yuri Bronfenbrenner. Yuri Bronfenbrenner was an American developmental psychologist but born in the Soviet Union, who is most known for his ecological systems theory of child development. His scientific work and his assistance to the United States government helped in the formation of the Head Start program in 1965. Bronfenbrenner's research and his theory was key in changing the perspective of developmental psychology by calling attention to the large number of environmental and societal influences on child development. Bronfenbrenner saw the process of human development as being shaped by the interaction between an individual and his or her environment. The specific path of development was a result of the influences of a person's surroundings, such as their parents, friends, school, work, culture, and so on. During his time, he saw developmental psychology as only studying individual influences on development in unnatural settings. In his own words, developmental psychology was, quote unquote, the science of strange behavior of children in strange situations with strange adults for the briefest possible periods of time. It is from this vantage point that Bronfenbrenner conceives his theory of human development, the ecological systems theory. His theory states that there are many different levels of environmental influences that can affect a child's development, starting from people and institutions immediately surrounding the individual to nationwide cultural forces. He later accounted for the influence of time, such as specific events and changes in culture over time, by adding the chronosystem to the theory. Furthermore, he eventually renamed his theory the bio-ecological model in order to recognize the importance of biological processes in development. However, he only recognized biology as producing a person's potential, with this potential being realized or not via environmental and social forces. Bronfenbrenner wrote about 300 research papers and 14 books in his lifetime and achieved the title of Jacob Gold Schurman Professor Emeritus of Human Development at Cornell University. He was married to Liz Price and had 6 children. He died at his home in Ithaca, New York on September 25, 2005 at the age of 88 due to complications with diabetes. He worked with 12 other professionals from various fields such as mental and physical health education, social work and developmental psychology. Bronfenbrenner convinced the panel to focus efforts on involving a child's family and community in the intervention effort so as to expand the program to also focus on the creation of a better environment for development. The panel's recommendation led to the formation of the Head Start program in 1965. Bronfenbrenner's input may have helped Head Start develop some of its environmental intervention methods such as family support services, home visits and education for parenthood. According to Melville L. Cohn, a sociologist from Johns Hopkins University, Bronfenbrenner was critical in making social scientists realize that interpersonal relationships, even at the smallest level of the parent-child relationship, did not exist in a social vacuum but were embedded in the larger social structures of community, society, economics and politics. His theory also helped to push developmental research into conducting observations and experiments to discern the impact of certain environmental variables on human development. His research and ideas were also influential in the formation and direction of the Head Start program. Let us look at some of the implications of Bronfenbrenner's theory of ecological systems. Bronfenbrenner sees the instability and unpredictability of family life that we have let our economy create as the most destructive force to a child's development. Children do not have the constant mutual interaction with important adults that is necessary for development. According to the ecological theory, if the relationships in the immediate microsystem break down, the child will not have the tools to explore other parts of his environment. Children do not have the constant mutual interaction with important adults that is necessary for development. According to the ecological theory, if the relationships in the immediate microsystem break down, the child will not have the tools to explore other parts of his environment. Children looking for the affirmations that should be present in the child-parent relationship look for attention in inappropriate places. These deficiencies show themselves especially in adolescence as antisocial behavior, lack of self-discipline, and the inability to provide self-direction. This theory has dire implications for the practice of teaching. Knowing about the breakdown occurring within children's home, is it possible for our educational system to make up for these deficiencies? It seems now that it is necessary for schools and teachers to provide stable, long term relationships. Yet, Bronfenbrenner believes that the primary relationship needs to be with someone who can provide a sense of caring that is meant to last a lifetime. This relationship must be fostered by a person or people within the immediate sphere of the child's influence. Schools and teachers fulfill an important secondary role but cannot provide the complexity of interaction that can be provided by primary adults. For the educational community to attempt a primary role is to help our society continue its denial of the real issue. The problems students and family face are caused by the conflict between the workplace and family life, not between families and schools. Schools and teachers should work to support the primary relationship and to create an environment that welcomes and nurtures families. We can do this while we work to realize Bronfenbrenner's ideal of the creation of public policy that eases the work family conflict. It is in the best interest of our entire society to lobby for political and economic policies that support the importance of parents' roles in their children's development. Bronfenbrenner would also agree that we should foster societal attitudes that value work done on behalf of children at all levels: parents, teachers, extended family, mentors, work supervisors, and legislators. Now let's summarize the module. Four principles, namely principle of interdependence, distribution of resources, adaptation and succession, guide the ecological system approach of community psychology. The social ecological theory is applicable to interventions at various levels. The microsystem refers to the institutions and groups that most immediately and directly impact the child's development, including family, school, religious institutions, neighborhood, and peers. The mesosystem refers to the interconnections between the microsystems, interactions between the family and teachers, a relationship between the child's peers and the family. The exosystem involves links between a social setting in which the individual does not have an active role and the individual's immediate context. For example, a parent's or a child's experience at home may be influenced by other parents' experiences at work. The parent might receive a promotion that requires more travel, which might increase conflict with the other parent and change patterns of interaction with the child. The macro system describes the culture in which individuals live. Cultural contexts include developing and industrialized countries, socioeconomic status, poverty, and ethnicity. A child, his or her parent, his or her school, and his or her parent's workplace are all part of a large cultural context. Members of a cultural group share a common identity, heritage, and values. The macro system evolves over time because each successive generation may change the microsystem, leading to their development in a unique macro system. The chronosystem involves the patterning of environmental events and transitions over the life course as well as socio-historical circumstances. For example, divorces are one transition. Researchers have found that the negative effects of divorce on children often peak in the first year after the divorce. By 2 years after the divorce, family interaction is less chaotic and more stable. An example of socio-historical circumstance is the increase in opportunities for women to pursue a career during the last 30 years. The person's own biology may also be considered part of the microsystem. Thus, this theory has recently sometimes been called the bio-ecological systems theory. As per this theoretical construction, each system contains roles, norms, and rules which may shape psychological development. For example, an inner city family faces many challenges which an affluent family in a gated community does not, and vice versa. The inner city family is more likely to experience environmental hardships like crime and squalor. On the other hand, the sheltered family is more likely to lack the nurturing support of extended family. Since his publication in 1979, Bronfenbrenner's major statement of this theory, the ecology of human development, has had widespread influence on the way psychologists and others approach the study of human beings and their environments. As a result of his groundbreaking work in human ecology, these environments, from the family to economic and political structures, have come to be viewed as part of the life course from childhood through adulthood. Although the social ecological theory contributes to asking new questions, making different observations, and applying different research methods in community psychology, it is still limited as an epistemological framework.
Community psychologists take what Kelly in 1972 has called an ecological view of human functioning, meaning that problems are seen as faulty adaptation in the natural environment rather than solely as deficiencies of individuals. According to Trickett in 1996, human activity does not develop in a social vacuum. Rather, it is vigorously situated within a socio-historical and cultural context of meanings and relationships. This way of thinking opens new ways of conceptualizing behavior because problems are not seen simply as a result of intra individual processes but also as incompatibilities between individuals and their environment, or as dysfunctional adaptations to a particular set of environmental circumstances. Kelly, in 1972, suggested using four principles from biological ecology to guide community psychologists. These are interdependence, distribution of resources, adaptation, and succession. The first principle of ecological model is interdependence. The social ecological model holds that the multiple components of a social context are interrelated and influence the other parts. Changes in one part may produce changes in other parts of the context. The second principle of ecological model is of distribution of resources. According to the social ecological model, all communities have different sets of resources. These include money, time, human resources, and political support. The community has within itself resources that can be used to solve many of its problems. This is about cycling of resources. The third principle of ecological model is of adaptation. Different skills or competencies are necessary to successfully adapt to the demands of each community. The second implication of this principle of adaptation is that for some individuals, the natural environment may not provide roles in which they can use their existing adaptive skills. The fourth principle of ecological model is of succession. Succession refers to the orderly process of community change as a way of adapting to new situations. The role of a community psychologist is not simply to help the community mobilize its resources to solve current problems, but to help it prepare for future changes. Bronfenbrenner in 1979 identified basically four environmental systems that are important in understanding individual behavior, namely microsystems, mesosystems, exosystems, and macrosystems. Interventions at the ecological levels of analysis may influence drug-related behaviors in the following ways. Firstly, the micro level. Micro level interventions may include education about the dangers of drug use for teenagers, improved family communication, and discussion groups. The exo level. A school can actively address the problem of drug abuse amongst learners by developing a drug policy and learners, parents, places of employment could provide medical insurance facilities. The macro level: legislation to restrict the availability of drugs and media campaigns to change the community's perception of drug use. The criticisms of ecological approach are that it focuses on change at the micro level, the meso level, and sometimes the exo level, but it is criticized for not being sufficiently transformative at the macro level. It does not sufficiently consider the complexities of the experiences and shared realities within communities. According to Applebaum's 1995 socio-ecological theory, it has not provided community psychology with a sufficiently clear map of the new territory to enable it to, at some stage, cross the bridge. Let us now summarize what we have learnt in this module. The social ecological theory is applicable to interventions at various levels. Although the socio-ecological theory contributes to asking new questions, many different observations, and applying different research methods in community psychology is the need of the hour.